Just before she passed away, she made her voice heard. Elvis Presley was close with the former Graceland maid for 10 years. What she said shocked her fans. More than 4 decades have passed since Nancy Rooks protected the king's secrets by remaining mum about the events at Graceland. However, her final remarks have since made headlines everywhere. A far cry from the heartfelt farewell that had been anticipated followed her statement. "It's time to tell everything." The maid who had worked at Graceland before her death broke the terrible news about Elvis. Did she see anything? What was the reason behind her silence? The status quo in Graceland. Before anyone else, Nicole Rook recognized Elvis Presley for who he was, a human being. She didn't encounter him in a bustling venue with a lot of people. She asked if there was any leftover bacon as she yawned and met him in his pajamas in the kitchen. While Nancy's employment at Graceland began in 1967 as a cleaner and cook, it soon evolved into something far more intimate. She became an ingrained part of Elvis's personal life as the years passed. Intimate breakfasts and furious tirades transpired before her eyes. There was more to Graceland than met the eye. It was a chaotic mess of emotions. Late at night, Elvis would pacing the halls, on occasion, alone with my thoughts. Misto, on different occasions, Nancy would sing alongside him in the kitchen as the house was filled with music. Gospel was his preferred musical style. While he was cooking, Nancy would hold a pan and a towel and sing "How Great Thou Art." He would smile as she joined him. She simply knew him as Mr. Elvis, even though everyone else recognized him. Nancy will never forget how he consistently expressed gratitude and asked for forgiveness. Later on, she would claim that he had a good upbringing. No matter how chaotic things got, whenever the phone rang or a flurry of visitors arrived, they were always kind to her. That being said, it was far from a picnic at Graceland. After Elvis's schedule shifted, Nancy found herself working late into the night. Suppose he rose at the crack of dawn. Misto, she would gladly wear her apron and whip up whatever they requested, be it bacon, biscuits, or sweet potato pie. There was a lot more to her than cleaning. There were occasions when she helped him put on his pants. Day and night often blended together in this place, so she set up his pool area, sorted his personal belongings, and laid out his clothes. It was out of the ordinary for Elvis. But Nancy didn't voice any disapproval. However, she noticed more than anyone anticipated. Inside Graceland, Elvis's Maid Remembers is a book that she penned after a long time had passed. Love, laughter, and gently spoken memories abound. There was zero criticism or nitpicking, but there were still secrets she concealed from them. This is what she said in her whispers. As long as she could, she would keep quiet about certain things, she said, because she didn't think anyone was prepared to hear them. Not because they're afraid, but because they adore them. Regardless, her devoted followers eagerly anticipated her every statement. They wanted to know Elvis's eating habits, clothes, and demeanor when the cameras were not rolling. While keeping the man behind the legend safe, Nancy revealed just the perfect amount of information to keep people interested. She would recall his meticulous cleanliness and the number of showers he would take daily. She would also keep in mind his preferences, such as a crispy bacon and perfectly scrambled eggs. And she'd recall how, without fail, he seemed to be searching the room for something he couldn't quite put his finger on. On the other hand, Nancy didn't just hand the world a trinket, she handed it something monumental. Viewpoint was the key. Elvis ceased to be a myth, a punchline, or a tragedy through her narratives. He became a person, an overeating, laughing, and crying man. Similarly, he disliked having drawn-out conversations with strangers. Someone famous who maintained close relationships with only a handful of friends. Additionally, Nancy Rooks played a subtle but significant role within that ensemble. Initially, she avoided attempting to steal the show, however she did begin to do that as her time was running out. She started to drop hints that there were more details, aspects of the story that she had kept under wraps. Her closest friends and family began to speculate about what she had been concealing for so long after she declared, "It's time to tell everything." What had she witnessed in her final days that she had decided to bury? This morning, August 16, 1977, appeared to be no different from any other morning. Elvis had stayed up late as usual. In the wee hours of August 16, 1977, he and his fiancée Ginger Alden, cousin Billy Smith, and others played racquetball. He returned to Graceland to find her already in the kitchen. Even though he was exhausted, she noticed that he was politely standing on the steps. She fed him, as she always had. "No, I'm not hungry at the moment," Elvis declared. "I just want to sleep, but I'd also like some water," said the woman. Nancy didn't give it much thought when it happened. He had been preoccupied and the night was hot. Pauline, another girl, was sent upstairs with a jug of ice water that resembled the ones used for orange juice and had a handle. It was nothing out of the ordinary. There were plenty of them in the house. Something was amiss, though, in Pauline's mind. Immediately after grabbing the jug, Elvis downed a large glass of water. "I ain't never known him to grab that water and drink it like he drank it this morning," she continued. It was unimportant to Nancy. "I think he's just tired from racquetball," she pointed out. The event, though, lingered in her thoughts. Around 9:30 a.m., upstairs she detected a deafening thud. It wasn't a collision per se, but something seemed off. No cries for assistance, screaming, or other signs of mayhem were audible. When she halted, waited, and listened, nothing but silence. The kind of silence you convince yourself is meaningless. Afterwards, she continued working. It took until nearly 1:50 p.m. the phone started ringing. It was difficult to understand Ginger, because her speech was so trembling. "Who's down there?" "Something bad happened up here," she inquired. She then proceeded to ask, "What is it?" Ginger's tears started flowing. It wasn't a minor thing anymore. Nancy realized. There was no shattered glass or tumble involved. An important issue arose. Her heart was pounding as she sprinted up the stairs after dropping the phone. After making her way down the hall, she entered the dressing room. Elvis lay motionless on the floor of the restroom, face down. "Oh my God," she whispered. "What is this?" she whispered, refraining from yelling. She was moving. Upon her swift return to the lower level, she found the Memphis Mafia waiting for her. It was critical that everyone be informed promptly. However, disorder gradually replaced order. As they became aware of what was happening, someone needed to call an ambulance. A great many individuals were startled. It wasn't Nancy. Upon arrival at Graceland, the doctors were completely lost. Nancy accompanied them as they climbed the stairs and maneuvered the stretchers around the hallway's sharp corners. She guided them by pointing out the route. When they apprehended Elvis, she caught a glimpse of him for the final time. He looked like he was asleep, she finally said. But by that point he had passed away. Several blue patches appeared on his face. Following that, progress was rapid. Crowds, alerts, and news vehicles. Elvis Presley's death was a tragedy. However, she no longer had Mr. Elvis, the man who, while laughing, once asked her to mend his pants. As the story went viral, she remained completely out of the spotlight. Word on the street was heart attack. Nothing more, nothing less. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't quite right. From the time Elvis drank that water until Nancy discovered him on the floor of the bathroom, many people speculated about dates, pill bottles, and what really transpired in those final. Keeping her composure and allowing the police to do their job, she refrained from speaking at the time. However, that warning would resurface for her many years later. Following the success of her previous endeavors, she had no intention of stopping. In her conversations, she would reveal her innermost thoughts and feelings, as well as any secrets she may have concealed for years, or even decades. Years after Elvis's death, she remained silent. It was not that she was speechless. Quite the contrary. Yes, you were careful not to cross certain boundaries. Sure thing in Memphis. Never mind when a legendary figure like Elvis Presley made such an impression on you. People from all over the globe had flocked to see Graceland's entrance. As if they had lost a brother, friend, or acquaintance, she had witnessed people weep whenever they spoke of the king. That sad feeling was familiar to Nancy. People heard about it from her. That might explain why, for a time, she chose to remain silent, rather than invite speculation. However, at other times, silence speaks volumes. Nancy remained employed by the Presley family. Following Elvis's death, from a private residence, she sought to transform Graceland into a museum. Upstairs, Elvis's private quarters were off limits to the public, media, and even the majority of the house staff. If you believe Nancy, the bedroom and bathroom were only dusted once or twice a month. It was like a secret code. Nobody should just stand around, or ask questions or make remarks. After you clean, you depart. However, each time she entered those rooms, she felt a shift within, and ultimately, she found herself staring at the identical floor, hallway, and restroom, and the morning would return to her. With each surface she wiped or shirt she folded, she was extremely cagey and when discussing it in public. At long last she put pen to paper. In the 1990s, with Inside Graceland, Elvis's Maid memories and acts of kindness abound. Many humorous anecdotes were shared regarding his preferred cuisine, musical tastes, and peculiar schedule. However, the final section, which was highly anticipated by us, was oddly ambiguous. Most people were satisfied with them. Nevertheless, those familiar with Nancy were able to discern subtle clues and points. She would halt conversations whenever specific topics were discussed. Her gaze would stray. If people knew what I know, they'd never hear his music the same again. It wasn't a threat, but that's what people said, she said. People had to wait. Additional inquiries surfaced during the subsequent years. People couldn't seem to agree on when Elvis passed away. So what gave? Why did someone appear to remove multiple medication bottles from the area prior to the arrival of the authorities? For what reason was the lab report revised multiple times before it was finally released to the public? The question then becomes, why eyewitnesses like Nancy didn't provide more context? She had actually given it a go, in secret. Of course, some of her closest friends claimed she confided in them over the years, but she insisted to keep it secret. According to her, Ginger was too distraught to explain why the Memphis Mafia wanted the police not to search the restroom, because it contained inappropriate items. Interestingly, according to one account, Nancy was instructed to tidy up before the rescuers arrived, even though she never explicitly stated that. On the other hand, she became feeble with age, devoid of wrath. Nancy was feeling overwhelmed, rather than furious. Something shifted when she was informed she had health issues as she gave her statement in an interview a year prior to her I did my duty for the family. I did my duty for the family. But I think someday before I go, the truth needs to be told. It was not a menacing statement. In a sense, it liberated me. It was widely believed in Nancy's book that she consistently told the truth. Is it possible that the most crucial detail was the one she omitted? Maybe there was more going on that morning than what she revealed. Perhaps her silence stemmed from a place of guilt, as much as respect. Those final remarks of Nancy's began to take on a new tone in the decades following Elvis's passing. A feeling of need, rather than profound contemplation, characterized them. Her entire life was devoted to honoring the man who employed her. However, towards the conclusion, it appeared as though she may have been concealing certain details in order to safeguard his recollection. Not only that, but she expressed doubt that it was still the best course of action. One final pledge true. In her final moments on Earth in 2022, Nancy Rooks uttered a subtle but startled thing. She refrained from making a public announcement or distributing a press release. She was different. Someone changed in her final months. According to those who knew her well, she expressed her thoughts and opinions more frequently. At first, nobody understood what she meant when she said, "It's time to tell everything." It was the last thing anyone expected. The last thing anyone expected to hear from the woman who had kept Elvis's secret for over 40 years. However, she had clearly reached a point where she was prepared to release. Not in pursuit of fame or drama, but in pursuit of tranquility. It was no secret that Nancy had always been Elvis's biggest fan. Her gentle reminiscence, humorous anecdotes, and mundane life details brought him closer to his admirers. But what she believed to have transpired in those last days had remained hidden from everyone. She had not shared it. A close friend of Elvis's claims that Nancy informed them that he was far from well in the weeks leading up to his death, much worse than the general public perceived. Problems began big. He allegedly told her he was exhausted, fed up with narcotics, sick of playing the part. Further she went. Nancy claimed that Elvis was being given medications by those close to him without proper authorization or supervision, which put him at risk. During that summer, she claimed to have found brand new bottles in the rubbish nearly daily. According to her, Elvis had a knack for dozing off in the middle of the most inconvenient of situations, such as a conversation, a meal, or even a sentence. At the time, she attributed to her exhaustion. Suddenly she began to learn that something far worse might have happened. Additionally, she revealed something she had never previously discussed in public: the events immediately following the discovery of Elvis on the floor of the bathroom. In the usual fashion, Nancy hurried upstairs the moment Ginger Alden cried and phoned downstairs to report a tragedy. The sight of Elvis's lifeless body, lying face down, paralyzed her. And then, unpredictability set in, returning to inform the Memphis Mafia of what had transpired. She descended. Even though the ambulance was on the way, Nancy remained mum about who had instructed her to tidy up. She was back then. A desk, a towel, and a few other items were all cleared away by her. It looked secure. As the media frenzy began and inquiries regarding medication and appointments arose, she pondered her potential action. Reportedly, she stated, "I didn't know what I was hiding." Her actual words were, "I just did what I was told." It seems like the water he drank too rapidly. The thump she heard that morning, and the brief attempt to clean up had been weighing heavily on her. Throughout the years, she convinced herself that it was irrelevant. However, during her final months, she was uncertain. Then she broke her silence and revealed to someone the one thing that had changed everything. Elvis hadn't actually died. There was a shift in him, and nobody did anything to stop it. The line stayed. To the people closest to Nancy, that explains why she appeared heavy in her final days. It was more her silence than her actions that caused the problem. A silent woman she remained. Did she in Elvis's protection, or that of those who allowed him to escape? The conversation has shifted since the words were spoken. It's time to tell everything. The former Graceland maid revealed the truth about Elvis before she passed away. That's bad. He wasn't inherently evil, rather. He may have been disappointed by those closest to him. The reason behind this was that there were indicators, and Nancy had pretended not to notice too many of them for far too long. What took place that was unexpected? The news that Nancy Rooks had bequeathed more than simply a recipe and fond memories took some time for people to process. Like her movements through Graceland, it insidiously crept in, remaining ever vigilant, without ever making a fuss. Shock, however, quickly spread when word got out about what she had said. Opinions broke down among fans. That would be unbelievable to some. As a last homage to a man in whom they had faith, Nancy's biography served as a holy book to them. It was uncomplicated, faithful, and uncontroversial. Elvis allegedly faded rather than merely falling, according to the same faithful maid. Worse yet, she might have aided with the clean in a way that the authorities found easier to deal with. Accusations that some close to Elvis had tampered with the evidence, even unintentionally, exacerbated existing sentiments. Justifications for the deaths were never adequately provided. It is a sudden cardiac arrest, the combination of drugs in his system, the delayed ambulance call, and the absence of an unredacted lab report all resurfaced with a vengeance. On the web, it generated a lot of buzz. Many longtime Elvis scholars and biographers thoroughly assessed the chronology. Someone had instructed Nancy to type, but in what? Could you tell me what she saw that morning? Her prolonged silence begs the question, why? If anyone had warned her against it, who would they be? Still, she had her share of admirers. They commended her for being courageous in her final days by telling it like it was. She may have finally realized that being truthful and respectful were not mutually exclusive. After years of defending the Presley name, Fans of Elvis should be aware that he was no match for anything, that even kings fall sometimes quietly, sometimes in stages, and usually with the assistance of others too afraid to intervene themselves. The Presley house was silent. Nobody said a word. Graceland continued performing live, touring, and selling merchandise. Those who knew Nancy and worked behind the scenes on the team, however, reported that something had changed. They committed an immoral act because they loved the man who had once treated them like family. There was no publicity tour, interview, or best-selling autobiography for Nancy. Those she confided in and trusted spoke only a few soft words. The power of those words outweighed that of any Nancy. She was free to take full responsibility. Truthfulness was her sole policy. The public's perception of Elvis's life and death was forever altered by that. Everyone could have intervened, but nobody had the guts to do so. In no uncertain, for the most part, Nancy kept to herself throughout her life, but her passing has made her voice heard clearly. What an burden the remnants were. Trouble with Not Left Behind by Nancy Rooks in the Edit. Her questions were heavy and quiet, the type that linger with you after the news has passed. Not even Elvis's reputation was safe from her wrath. She yearned to shield the man she knew some harm, the gospel singer who begged for crispy bacon and sang gospel in the kitchen. In contrast, even the most carefully constructed falsehoods can contain truth. Even though she seemed to know everything, Nancy never said as much. None of that applied to her. Not a doctor was that woman. While doing housework and cooking, she realized there was a greater purpose. However, her message became significant because of that. Lying wasn't necessary. There was no requirement for her to generate fresh ideas, because it was grounded in real life. Her truth was powerful. Given her present, while she didn't intend to accuse anyone, she did say, "It's time to tell everything." What she meant was that, even well-intentioned silence can feel like betrayal at times. For a long time, Nancy believed she was showing Elvis respect by keeping some things from him. However, as she matured, she realized that showing respect for someone does not imply pretending everything is alright. Despite her passing, she painted a multifaceted portrait of Elvis and his environment. In this realm, pharmaceuticals were distributed like sweets. It was a place where people were too scared to challenge the status quo, where the most outspoken individuals in his immediate vicinity failed to raise their voices at crucial. For fans who thought they had the plot figured out, there was more to consider. Not because Nancy uncovered the plot, but because she demonstrated how to go on after someone else has failed. What it's like to have regrets about doing something you didn't completely comprehend when you were doing it. Elvis wasn't portrayed in a new light in Nancy's final thoughts. They demonstrated that here was, and their staffers are human beings just like everyone. The melancholy may fade into a hush, and the hush may persist for years. Additionally, telling the truth does not necessarily imply exposing someone. The central theme is releasing a narrative that hasn't used for an extended period of time. She has departed. She helped the paramedics reach the second floor, folded it, and brought him water on his last morning. She chose to speak up just once before the end, said some quiet things, and left some lines unfinished, but her voice is still there. She may have never done anything so powerful. Was Nancy Rooks's final statement the sole way to genuinely honor the man she fought so hard to protect? Or did she wait too long to tell the truth?